So to start with, you have the game view. This is what the game will look like when you're actually playing it. So that's why I removed everything, so you can see it's literally empty space. So this is always the default. You can change it to say like have a skybox, to have like a background and visuals, but generally speaking, every scene will start like this. You can't do much here because it's just an example. So that's why we go to the scene view. The scene view is where we can actually make changes and edit things and add our own components. So I'm going to add the plane in so you can see it. Anything that you touch or interact with in the scene view will appear on the hierarchy. And anything that you interact with on the hierarchy will appear in the scene view. So it goes back and forth. For a simple scene like this, it won't make much of a difference. But once you get really large scenes, I might be able to use one of my other projects as an example. This is a good example of why scene organization matters. If I was to try and find truck number 3, it would be a bit of a nightmare to select the exact point. So I've clicked on something that's not what I meant to click on. It makes more sense to look for it here, and I can say, is it truck I'm looking for? Yeah, it's like Cybertruck, I think it's called. So I have several objects called Cybertruck, and by double clicking on them, it will automatically find in the scene which one I'm looking for. Any of them basically, and then so we can search for it, find it here, and if you open it up, I can zoom in even further. I think, there we go. And then now I can actually find the specific truck I'm looking for. So once scenes get really big, you need to get familiar with switching back and forth between using the hierarchy and then using the scene for looking for things. One thing that I personally find really annoying is sometimes you'll go to click on something. Unity has a way of saying, I'm going to give you everything except what you're trying to click on. Right now, if I click here, that's fine, like it clicks on the road. But sometimes I'll try and click on, say, this truck, and there we go. So I tried to click on this unit, and I think it's highlighted something over here. And it's highlighted like 3 different objects because it doesn't quite recognize where I'm trying to click. So you're going to have that a lot, which is why sometimes you can hide an object by selecting here. Yeah. So there's a little icon. And what that will do is it just hides the object from your immediate point of view. It doesn't remove it from the game. If I hit play, it will still be there. But it just means it's easier to then select something that might be behind what I'm currently trying to select. So it's just helpful when it comes to navigating the scene. So we'll go back to this one. Anything you select here will appear on the right in the inspector. This is where you get your basic information about objects. So if I click on this generic game object, every object has a transform, which lets you know its position in the space, rotation, and scale. You want to keep an eye on scale because sometimes that changes unintentionally and it can have cascading effects because an object that is scaled can sometimes automatically scale another object, depending on how you relate them together. I won't go down that rabbit hole right now, but I just thought keep an eye on scale. Try, where possible, to always make a scale of 1. If you need to scale something up, it helps to create a child object. So right now I've got an empty object here, and then I can throw in, let's say, Tago. If I want Tago to be a scale of 5, if I then have him interact with the game, sometimes the interactions he has will be to that scale. So it might be pick up, I don't know, throw a knife or something. That knife will suddenly be 5 times bigger than I intended it to be. But you might get the opposite, and it might be its original size when I wanted it to scale up. So it gets confusing, which is why it does help to sometimes take an object that you had to scale and place it into another object, like an empty object. Use that as a default, where it's 1, 1, and 1. And then the child object is the one that you scaled. Ideally, every object should be made to scale to begin with. But in reality, that just doesn't always happen. So I do like to mention that to people because it's one that does trip people up, is objects that aren't scaled properly. So we've got our game view, our scene view. We have our hierarchy and the inspector. When you're adding scripts, so instead of having like one main script where you're changing, each object will have its own individual script. And they will automatically run what's called the update, which you can essentially see as like the main loop. But they have their own independent implementation. That can make things tricky when you want things to run in a very specific order, because Unity will do that for you. So you need to be careful if you have objects where you want one to run first and then the other one to run. You're going to have to manually override Unity's, because Unity will automatically assign who goes first, or they are simultaneous. So just keep that in mind when it comes to taking that further. So I will demonstrate quickly, like adding scripts in a second. The last thing I just wanted to mention was the assets, or the project window at the bottom. This is where we add our assets. And like I was saying earlier, assets are essentially anything that you're using in your game, from the scene itself to the scripts to the models, etc. Some people refer to them separately, so asset might be art specifically, but in Unity terms, everything is an asset, which is technically the correct way of using it. One more thing I didn't mention earlier, there's also the console, which will show you errors, warnings, and log notes if you want to add those to help you with your debugging. There is a glitch right now on mine. This is a new laptop, and for some reason it's saying that I don't have Git installed when I do, and it's asking me to fix that. I will fix that later. It runs regardless, so we're just going to ignore that. But later on, if more errors come up, then we do need to address them. I just thought I'd mention that now in case someone says, why is there an error that I'm just ignoring? So, that is our basic Unity interface. Do you have any questions before we